The average person has 5 hours of free time every single day. How are you spending it? Hey, I'm Latt Millard, and I like to challenge myself every single week to learn or improve at some skill. And this week, I learned how to improve my YouTube thumbnail making skills. I've been doing research all week long, and I wanted to share with you what I learned. So, why YouTube thumbnails? Well, I do YouTube, and I knew that there were improvements that I could make to the thumbnails that I was using. I definitely knew that I was not trying as hard as I could be. But as I went through the research and started to learn, the trends of the do's and the don'ts, I started to realize something, and it's that every single thumbnail that I had has mostly don'ts and very few do's. so, so I knew that there was a lot of improvement that we could make. All that said, I wanted to give you a list of 3 do's and 3 don'ts, and the best way I think to apply that is to look at one of my own older thumbnails and go through that list and actually try to update it with those new guidelines that I've set for myself. So before we get into the do's and the don'ts of YouTube thumbnail making, I think that the most important thing that you can possibly do, and really the thing that you should be doing first, is pick some people whose YouTube channel that you really enjoy and are similar in terms of their niche and the audience that they speak to, and look at their thumbnails. Figure out what exactly their style is and how they are enticing you to actually either read the title or even to click on the video just with the thumbnail itself. And I think that what you'll find as you look through all those thumbnails is that the tactics that they employ are pretty similar to our list of do's and don'ts here. The don'ts. The most important thing that I didn't even consider when I started making YouTube thumbnails, and it's really silly because you might, you may already know this one, or you may not have thought about it in your entire life. In the bottom right corner of any YouTube thumbnail is the timestamp, and that covers up a pretty significant portion of the screen. So when you're actually creating a thumbnail, anything that you put in the bottom right corner is just covered up. It's just completely covered up and impossible to either read what text is underneath it, or if there's a picture underneath it, you can't see it at all. So that bottom right corner of the screen, as you're looking at the screen, that bottom right corner is just completely covered. And looking through some of my old thumbnails, I didn't consider that even for a second. Don't number 2. Don't clutter the image. It sounds really obvious when you say it out loud, but visual clutter is a little bit different than you might expect it to be. So when you're creating a thumbnail on your computer, the image is pretty large, and so something that you think is fully readable, when it actually gets shrunk down to thumbnail size, is going to be extremely cluttered with either text or too many different images in the background. And you can see from some of my older thumbnails, I didn't even try to not make it cluttered. I maybe thought that clutter was a style that I should be using. I don't know. We'll have to either interrogate that or just learn from our mistakes and move on in the future. That's one of the things that you really need to consider is 70% of people use YouTube on their phone. And the size of a thumbnail on the phone is, it's nothing. It's smaller than my glasses are right now. You know what I mean? Like it is absolutely nothing. And so you really need everything to be clear and concise. And then step number 3, using text in thumbnails sometimes is useful, sometimes is not. If you do use it, using sparingly. But the main don't is that we don't want to repeat any text that we're going to put in the thumbnail in the title. If you're enticing someone with text in the thumbnail, you want that information to then add to the title. You want them to go and read the title and not just read the same thing over and over again. You know, YouTube thumbnails and titles, they're really the most important part of the video in terms of getting people to view it in the first place, long before your content is good. You could have the best content in the world and nobody's ever going to see it because they don't feel enticed to click on your thumbnail. All that said, now we can cover the things that you should be doing. To do number 1, center the subject of the video. What does that mean? That means that whatever the video is about, we want to convey that as clearly and concisely as possible inside of the thumbnail. Often, that someone or something is you, right? So if it is like me here, talking about what I've learned about YouTube thumbnails all week, the center of the thumbnail should be me, but we're also going to have to use a little bit of text to make it clear that we are talking about the thumbnail itself and how we can make the thumbnails better. Do number 2, use bright contrasting colors. Really, 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 really. If everything in the thumbnail is bland, people are just going to click right off of it. That's marketing is really all that it is. You want to use flashy, eye-catching, contrasting colors. This has been researched over and over and over and over again, and that is how you can catch people's eye and get them to either read the text in a thumbnail or read the actual title of the video. And at that point, if it is something that they want to watch, that's when they'll click on the video. So those bright contrasting colors are extremely important. And do number 3, well, we kind of already went over it. It's be aware of how small your thumbnail is going to be. You really want to, as you're editing the image, every once in a while, if you think like, oh, okay, well, I could try and do this. Well, we're really going to want to zoom out on that picture, because if you're editing at 100%, well, it's only going to be about 10% of that on, you know, somebody's phone or on the screen. So you really, really want to be aware of how small that thumbnail is going to be. So enough of just watching me talk to a camera. Let's actually take these tips and apply them to an old thumbnail of mine. Okay, so here we are in the digital world, looking at one of the thumbnails that I have created in the past. The reason that I chose this, 1 is because it was one of my better performing videos, and 2 because it had the most number of do's and the least number of don'ts, but even just by looking at it, I think that you can tell that there is a pretty significant number of don'ts on here and not a whole lot of do's. So what is this video? Well, I do stream on Twitch, and I do some speedrunning of the video game Hades. That is what we are trying to convey, that we beat Hades on hell mode, right? That's what we're trying to convey here. So let's just quickly run through the do's and the don'ts and see if I'm even in the right ballpark. I think there's at least a baseline of level to work from here. So our things to avoid: we want to avoid the bottom right corner because of the timestamp. Oops. So here's the thing. Once we make this image smaller, the timestamp is going to be just right inside of my face. Just completely inside of my face. You can't even see my face at all in here. Step 2, don't clutter the image. 70% of people use YouTube on their mobile phone. This does an okay job of not being cluttered. It has, you know, not too many elements if you think about it, right? So it has the background, my face, you know, a little picture of Hades over here, the name of the game, and then the text. So it's not that bad. There aren't too many elements. However, the text is basically the same color as the background. I don't know what I was thinking. I don't know why I thought people would be able to read this. I put like the tiniest little, you know, kind of drop shadow on there just to make it slightly pop out from the background, but it's just bad. It's really, really bad, especially once it gets shrunk down to YouTube thumbnail size. The text looks exactly the same as the background, and I would say that that's visual clutter. So one of the main things that we're going to do is try and cut down the size of this text. So one of the first things that I did was I wanted to make my own face much larger in the video. This is part of centering the subject of the video. The subject of the video is myself. This is from a live stream that I did, and I was very proud of the result that we had, and so it is really about me playing the game, right? And we wanted to make the subject of the video a bit larger and a bit more readable. The me holding up 3 fingers here, I just didn't like it. I started to think about it a bit more, and so I did go ahead and just erase my hand from the image. There was no particular need for me to be as excited as I was about being the 3rd person ever to do a thing. So I got rid of that. The second thing that I wanted to declutter was the text on the image. One of the things that you want to be able to, or really want to think through, are the fonts that you're using. Are the fonts actually readable? And the font that I was using before, it was okay, but we can use, a bit more of a bold font that's actually going to stick out more when you go to read the thumbnail on the screen. And in addition to making the actual text itself more readable, what I did was I added an actual drop shadow to the back of it to make sure that the orange text actually has a dark background to make it be able to pop out from the flames in the background of the video. So I added an actual drop shadow effect to the text to be able to make it more clear. And then we get to probably one of the most interesting parts of the edit. One of the things that we want to do is actually use these bright contrasting colors in order to draw people's eye to the thumbnail and to the title of the video. So green and yellow are slightly contrasting, or green and orange, they're slightly contrasting colors to one another. But if you actually look at a color wheel, the most contrasting color for orange is actually blue. So in order to make both the name of the game and myself pop out in the video, I actually changed all of that green text and even the green of my shirt to a blue color so that we had this nice contrast on the screen that actually helps draw your eye to it as you're searching through YouTube or scrolling through your recommended videos. The last thing that I do after making all of these edits is I always want to zoom out on the image and make sure that everything looks correct and actually properly pops out on the screen when it is much smaller and much more YouTube thumbnail sized. And so you can see here, I zoomed out and I said, ooh, well, the name of the game is kind of readable, but perhaps we could actually make that more so. And so I actually added a bit of a white drop shadow on it in order to make it stick out a bit more at that smaller scale. And that was what we ended with. And the funny thing is as soon as I went to go upload that photo to the thumbnail of the video, I realized my face was still too small. So I actually made one final edit. I made the size of my head a little bit bigger because the timestamp in the bottom right hand corner of the screen was still basically completely covering my face. So I once again increased the size of my face on the thumbnail. Everything else remained the same, and that was it. So all of that is what I learned in 1 week of doing some closer research on how to improve my YouTube thumbnails. Do you think the second image was better than the first one? And most importantly, do you think the thumbnail for this video succeeded in following those rules and guidelines? Let me know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this, consider liking and subscribing for more new skills every single week. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.